The rain came down in sheets, flattening the tall grass that once swayed like green waves across the old family plot in northern Michigan. Sam stood alone at the curb, shoulders slumped, watching rivulets crawl down the side of the battered Crown Vic. The eviction notice was a pale flag of surrender, wilted in his trembling hand. Every corner of Detroit he'd ever called home was gone now, dissolved behind him into the dark, humming ache of memory. He slid the last box into the trunk. Contents not worth half the gas it would take to reach the edge of the city. Atlas sat in the passenger seat, upright and alert, brown eyes never leaving Sam's face. Not a whimper, not a bark. Just that silent attention, the kind that forgives what the world won't. Sam lingered by the open car door, one hand on Atlas's broad back, as if he could absorb some of the steadiness from that familiar warmth. The dog's ear flicked, his tail tapped once, slow and patient, on the cracked vinyl seat. Sam let out a breath. Not a sigh, not a groan, just the sound a man makes when he runs out of words. He eased into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and the city shrank behind him, glass towers dissolving in rain, red brake lights flickering in the rear view like dying coals. It was nearly midnight by the time the headlights picked out the leaning mailbox at the old farm road. Beyond the ditch, wild sumac had swallowed the fence lines. And somewhere in the shadows stood the skeleton of his childhood. Grandpa's yellow school bus, rusted, half hidden by weeds and fog. He remembered how, as a boy, he'd thought it looked like a whale caught in a sea of grass, barnacles of lichen clinging to the fenders. Now the bus's empty windows gaped like wounds. He wondered if they were staring back at him, judging, waiting, asking what kind of man returned home in the middle of the night, his pockets empty, his future thinner than a raindrop. He killed the engine. For a long moment, he sat in the stillness. The only sound was the soft snuffling of Atlas, who watched him with the unwavering faith that comes only from dogs and children, before the world teaches them otherwise. Sam stepped out, boots sinking in mud. The box pressed to his chest. He waded through waist-high grass. Atlas pressed close against his thigh. Inside the bus, the air was cool and sharp with the tang of mildew and old dreams. Dust motes floated in the sweep of his flashlight. He lowered the box onto a warped seat, its faded vinyl splitting at the seams. The rain intensified, drumming a steady, anxious rhythm on the roof. Atlas sniffed the corners, tail swishing in slow arcs, then circled back and pressed his great head into Sam's hand. That gentle nudge, solid, grounding, reminded Sam of everything that hadn't slipped through his fingers yet. He let his palm rest there, feeling the deep, slow breaths beneath the thick fur, the way Atlas leaned into him as if to say, "Here now we begin again." Sam sagged onto a seat, staring through the cracked windshield at nothing. His chest ached with shame at being 48, a former cop, washed out by a job that had once been his pride and undoing. He remembered the faces he'd let down, his ex-wife's tight-lipped pity, his son's wary distance, his daughter's silence on the other end of the line. All of it sat with him now, heavy as the night, as Atlas curled at his feet and watched the door. Lightning flickered far off, illuminating the raindrops as they traced silver threads down the glass. Sam blinked hard, hands shaking, not from cold, but from something deeper, older, that had never left him since that day in Detroit, when everything went sideways. When the badge meant nothing, and the uniform was just a costume you wore for a world that no longer wanted you. He shivered. Atlas, sensing the tremor, rose and rested his chin on Sam's knee. For a moment, Sam let the warmth anchor him, slow his heartbeat, soften the ache inside. The loneliness did not recede, but it changed shape. Less a gnawing hunger, more a quiet hollow. He looked down at Atlas and managed a small, broken smile. The wind rattled the bus. Outside, the world was washed clean. Inside, Sam was empty, except for the dog at his side and the faint echo of his grandfather's laughter somewhere in the metal bones of the bus. Tomorrow, he told himself, would be different. But for tonight, it was enough to have a roof, a friend, and the thin, uncertain thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, this place, this moment, was not the end, but the edge of something that might hold. The storm crept in after midnight, wind whipping through the holes in the bus's old skin, rain lashing against the windows like impatient fingers. Thunder rolled over the fields, rattling loose screws, sending a tremor down the narrow aisle where Sam sat hunched on the edge of a seat. Atlas paced, his claws clicking on linoleum, every instinct awake, ears flicking toward the shadows that pressed against the glass. Sam's breathing quickened. He shut his eyes, and for a moment, the years folded back. A flash of headlights, the pop and echo of gunfire in a Detroit alley, blood on his hands, his partner's voice dissolving into static. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into fists, knuckles white against the faded denim of his jeans. He forced himself to count his breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4, but the rhythm slipped away every time the thunder crashed. Atlas nudged his knee. Sam opened his eyes to see the dog's face inches from his own, brown gaze steady and calm. The rain was louder now, drumming a wild, insistent song overhead. Sam let out a shuddering exhale. He reached down, fingers buried deep in Atlas's thick ruff, grounding himself in that living presence. The bus swayed in the wind. Atlas didn't move, didn't flinch, just watched him, unmoving, as if holding the night at bay. A memory surfaced, his daughter Emily, no more than 10, pressing her hand into his after a bad dream. The smell of lavender, a lullaby half-whispered, her voice trembling. "Daddy, will you stay until the morning?" He remembered the way he'd told her yes, and the way his work had made a liar out of him, again and again. That was the night he'd promised to come home, and hadn't. Atlas whined, low and soft. Sam blinked hard. The present steadied him. The bus, the dog, the rain. He rose, moving toward the back of the bus, hoping that a task might dull the restless ache inside his chest. His boots echoed in the empty space. Atlas followed close, tail brushing the backs of Sam's legs. A flash of lightning revealed a loose floorboard near the rear emergency exit. Bare wood splintered and curled at the edges. Atlas pawed at it, then looked up, waiting. Sam crouched, curiosity fighting the weariness in his bones. He slid his fingers under the edge and pried it up, expecting nothing more than dust or a mouse nest. Instead, tucked inside a gap between the floor joists, he found a battered old leather journal, edges softened by age and use. The cover bore a faint inscription in careful block letters. Walt Whitaker, 1959. Sam sat back on his heels. Walt, his grandfather. The man who'd taught him how to work an engine, who'd let him drive the tractor, who'd said, "There's nothing so broken it can't be fixed, if you're patient enough." Thunder cracked again. Sam climbed onto a seat and cradled the journal in his lap, thumbing carefully through brittle pages. The writing was neat, spare, entries about tools and weather, about building the barn after the war, about long nights with no money and the stubborn, small joys of making do. Tucked between the lines were sketches of machines, wildflowers, the school bus itself in its first years of service. Sam traced his grandfather's words, the pen strokes pressed deep from a steady, unhurried hand. He let the weight of memory settle over him. The pain of loss, his partner, his job, his family, felt different here. Less an accusation, more an inheritance. Something handed down, not to be escaped, but understood. Atlas hopped onto the bench beside him, turning 3 slow circles before settling, chin on Sam's knee. Sam scratched the base of his ear, then found himself reading the journal out loud, voice thin but sure in the quiet. A man is not the sum of what he's lost, but what he's willing to rebuild. Don't ever forget that, Sammy. The words lingered after the thunder faded. Sam leaned back, closing his eyes, letting the rain and the rise and fall of Atlas's breathing remind him that the world, though battered, was still turning. He glanced out the window, saw his reflection layered over the field, rain-washed and hollow-eyed. The storm had begun to pass. The wind still sang through the broken windows, but the violence was gone, replaced by a soft, tired hush. Sam felt the old bus settle around him, wood creaking, the metal frame groaning, Atlas's chest rising and falling in rhythm with his own. He thought of his family, scattered now. Emily in Chicago, Lucas somewhere out west, neither answering his calls. He imagined them small again, jumping in puddles, Atlas a puppy chasing after them in circles, the whole world contained in one golden backyard. The memory was sharp as a blade, but it didn't cut, not tonight. It simply reminded him that once there had been laughter here. He closed the journal, holding it against his chest. Atlas yawned, long and loud. Sam smiled, a real smile, small but stubborn. "Guess it's just us now, buddy," he murmured, voice barely more than a breath. Atlas thumped his tail, then drifted off to sleep. Sam stretched out on the seat, the journal still pressed to his heart. He listened to the last sighs of rain, the chorus of frogs rising from the ditch, the slow calming of his own pulse. Shame and terror hadn't left him, but gratitude, fragile as it was, glowed in the silence between each thunderclap. He was not healed, not whole, but for the first time in years, as the storm faded and the dawn teased at the horizon, he believed he might stay, here in the shelter of memory and fur and the broken bus that was, for tonight, enough. Dawn came slow and gray, bleeding through the fog over the field. The old bus, battered and silent, was a dim outline against the trees. Sam lay on the bench, boots tucked under his jacket, one arm flung over Atlas's warm side. The journal rested on his chest like a second heartbeat. Atlas woke first. He stretched with a yawn that sounded almost like a word, paws scraping softly at the metal floor. Sam blinked awake to the dog's soft nose nudging his shoulder, steady as always. The storm had passed. The silence outside was different, heavier but gentler too. Sam's mind drifted to the journal, the words of his grandfather echoing as if they'd been spoken just hours ago. A man is not the sum of what he's lost, but what he's willing to rebuild. He sat up, careful not to disturb Atlas, and thumbed through the journal again. The entries felt like a lifeline, notes about fixing tractors and patching fences, but also about enduring things that can't be fixed with tools. There were lines about grief, the war, neighbors who moved away or died, but always some small answer at the end of each hardship. Keep your hands busy, your heart open. Don't let the dark inside eat what the light outside still offers. Sam hadn't worked with his hands in months. His fingers felt clumsy and slow, calluses grown soft. He studied the sketches in the margins, bolts and screws, wheels and beams, the yellow bus drawn over and over, in different stages of being built and rebuilt. Something old and stubborn in Sam stirred. For the first time in a long time, he wondered if there was still work in him worth doing. Atlas watched, head tilted, ears pricked with curiosity. Sam smiled, a wry twist of the lips, and reached for a battered pencil from the box of odds and ends he'd carried from Detroit. He opened the journal to a blank page and started sketching. A rough floor plan, a list of materials, half-formed ideas. The act was awkward, but as the pencil scratched against the page, something in him eased. He moved through the bus, making notes. Which seats would have to go, where light could come in, how to insulate the worst of the drafts. Atlas followed, tail high, nosing into forgotten corners, sometimes stopping to stare at Sam as if to say, "Yes, this is right." The two of them fell into a quiet rhythm, Sam talking under his breath. Maybe a wood stove here. Could run wiring through that gap. Need to find better glass for the front windows. And Atlas always near, the silent partner in every decision. By midday, Sam was sweating despite the cold, jacket tied around his waist. The process was slow. Every sound was amplified. The metallic grind as he tried to loosen bolts, the hollow thunk of rotten wood hitting the floor, the scrape of rusted steel. But each small problem solved felt like a win, each setback less important than the act of trying. He paused often, hands braced against his knees, breath coming rough. When memories threatened to crowd in, gunshots in alleys, the siren's wail, the hollow silence of his apartment after his badge was gone. He focused on the present, the ring of the hammer, the whir of the drill, Atlas circling to nudge his side or fetch a fallen glove. The dog seemed to know, in his own wordless way, that this work was not about shelter or comfort, but about something deeper. At one point, while prying loose a row of seats, Sam's hand slipped and the wrench clattered under the floorboards. He cursed softly, frustration flaring. Then Atlas, tail wagging, ducked low, muzzle digging, until he nudged the tool out again. Sam couldn't help but laugh, the sound rough but real. He ruffled Atlas's ears. "What would I do without you, huh?" Atlas responded with a happy snort, eyes bright. As the day wore on, Sam began to imagine the finished bus, not as a place to hide from the world, but as a home made by his own effort. The journal's pages called to him with every break, a reminder that dignity wasn't in what he'd lost, but in the quiet labor of making something new. He found himself whispering words he hadn't said aloud in years. "Thank you. Thank you for the chance to try again." He stopped mid-afternoon to heat a can of soup over his old camp stove. He and Atlas shared it. Sam hunched on the steps, Atlas's chin resting on his knee. Sunlight slanted through the windows, dust motes drifting in lazy circles, the world so quiet that Sam could hear the pulse of his own hope, faint but growing. As evening crept in, Sam sketched by lantern light. Atlas curled close. He mapped out insulation, marked a spot for a bed, drew a rough outline for shelves and a bench by the front window. His movements grew steadier, his mind quieter. The ghost of his grandfather hovered in the silence, not judging but watching, offering the quiet company of memory. Later, with the bus dim and cold, Sam propped the journal open to a page scrawled with words from a winter long gone. Some things can't be saved, but you don't leave them behind. You carry them with you in the things you choose to make. Sam looked at Atlas, who lifted his head, eyes steady and calm. Sam nodded to the dog and then to himself, feeling the decision settle in his bones. Tomorrow the work would begin in earnest, not just to survive, but to reclaim something lost, to build not only a shelter, but a life. Atlas, sensing the shift, wagged his tail and curled up close, anchoring Sam once more as darkness fell, and hope, small and stubborn, took root in the gentle hush of the bus. The days in northern Michigan unfurled slow and cold, fog lifting late each morning to reveal the bus gleaming dully in the field, dew gathered in the rust and rivets. Sam woke with the sun, Atlas already alert, nose pressed to the glass as dawn crept across the grass. It was the first time in months Sam had greeted the morning with anything close to purpose. He started by hauling out the old bus seats, muscles aching with the unfamiliar labor. Each bolt was a stubborn reminder of years gone by, each one stuck fast by time and neglect, each one requiring patience, force, and a dozen small failures before it yielded. Atlas stayed near, watching intently, sometimes dropping a tool at Sam's feet or nosing a length of pipe into reach. It wasn't always helpful, but it was something. Company, witness, the subtle comfort of not working alone. Inside the bus, dust swirled and sunlight streamed through gaps in the panels. Sam tore out cracked linoleum, layers of rotten wood, the smell of mildew hanging thick in the air. Some days he felt swallowed by the enormity of the task, his hands trembling. Sweat prickling his scalp even in the chill. When his breath caught, when panic crept close, he'd rest his palm on Atlas's back, the dog's steady warmth grounding him, reminding him to come back to this moment, to this bus and field and morning light. He found himself listening for his grandfather's voice in the hush between hammer blows, the way Walt used to say, "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." The memory was gentle, a balm instead of a wound. Sam learned to take breaks, stepping outside to stretch, to let Atlas run wild circles through the grass, coming back with dew shining on his coat, a muddy stick clamped proudly in his jaws. Every day brought small, stubborn victories, a bolt loosened after an hour of sweat, a window coaxed open that hadn't budged in years. The rhythm of labor began to quiet the restlessness in Sam's chest. There was a grace in the work, slow, repetitive, requiring more patience than strength. Each task finished was a promise kept to himself, a thread pulled back from the darkness. Some afternoons, Sam would find himself staring out across the field, back aching, palms raw, watching the sunlight ripple through the grass. Atlas would come to sit beside him, body pressed close, both of them watching the sky for nothing in particular. In those moments, Sam felt something shift, some hidden corner of himself softening, some of the shame and anger dissolving in the open air. One cold morning, as he pried away a warped panel near the back of the bus, Sam's fingers brushed against something smooth. He paused, heart thudding, and gently peeled away the tape holding it in place. An old photograph, faded but unmistakable. A family portrait taken just before the world began to fray. Sam, a younger man with tired eyes but a genuine smile. Emily, hair in wild braids clinging to his arm. Lucas, all elbows and knees, already refusing to grin for the camera. And Sarah, his ex-wife, smiling with a kindness Sam couldn't quite remember anymore. Behind them, the bus itself, new and hopeful, yellow paint bright against the Michigan sky. Sam traced the edges of the photo, thumb lingering over each face. He felt a mixture of longing and regret so fierce it almost dropped him to his knees. For a while he just sat there, the photo in his lap, Atlas watching quietly. The weight of the years settled on his shoulders, not as a punishment, but as proof that he'd once been part of something that mattered. He tucked the photo into the journal, closing it with reverence. He knew then, with a certainty as deep as his loneliness, that the bus could never just be shelter. It had to be a place where memory and hope lived together, where past and present could speak in the quiet. The photo was not just a relic, it was a compass. The days followed one another, gentle as a tide. Sam learned the habits of the land, the way fog gathered in the hollows at dusk, the cry of sandhill cranes overhead, the musky scent of wet leaves after rain. He took breaks to brew coffee on the small camp stove, pouring half into a battered mug for himself and letting Atlas lick the rest from the bowl. At night, with his body sore and mind finally quiet, Sam and Atlas would sit in the doorway of the bus, watching the sky darken from pink to navy to deep, silent black. Sometimes, a coyote would call from the woods, answered by another far off. Atlas would growl low in his throat, then settle as Sam reassured him with a steady hand. In those dark hours, Sam began to realize how much the work was healing him, piece by slow, uneven piece. The pain was still there, PTSD, grief, loss, but it no longer defined every moment. He measured his days now by progress. A wall patched, a frame reinforced, a corner swept clean. He caught himself humming sometimes, old songs from childhood. The sorrow was still there, but now it moved alongside something gentler. Acceptance, maybe, or the first trace of forgiveness. Atlas slept curled at his feet, one ear always open, the steadfast guardian of this fragile new life. Sam understood, watching the dog's slow breathing, that healing was not an endpoint. It was a practice, a rhythm, a long series of small decisions made in the company of a friend, under a sky that promised nothing and somehow everything. That night, he pressed his palm to the window, feeling the cold, and whispered, not for anyone to hear, but because hope needed to be spoken. "We're still here. We're still trying." And Atlas, waking, thumped his tail in the quiet, as if to say, yes, that's enough, for now. Late September arrived quietly, cool and damp. The grass bent with every step, the scent of earth thick and familiar. Sam worked on the bus each morning, the old school bell from the farmhouse ringing out across the land as the sun crept over the trees. The walls inside were taking shape, new panels sanded smooth, Atlas's muddy paw prints marking every patch of plywood, each one a sign of shared presence. Sam felt the change in his hands, skin roughening, muscles finding a purpose they'd forgotten. Atlas moved with him everywhere, a shadow, a sentinel, a heartbeat against the gathering quiet. Some evenings, Sam allowed himself to believe that the rhythm of work and companionship could last, that maybe he and Atlas were enough. But then came the knock. Distant at first, almost imaginary, the sound of a car crunching gravel at the edge of the overgrown drive. Sam paused, heart thudding. Atlas's head jerked up, ears pricked. The car door slammed, heavy and unfamiliar, a sound out of place in this sanctuary of weeds and rust. He stepped into the morning light, wiping sawdust from his palms. At the end of the lane stood Emily and Lucas, his children, now adults, faces older than he remembered. Emily's hair was longer, streaked with gray. Lucas wore a heavy jacket, hands buried deep in his pockets. Their eyes flickered from Sam to the bus and back again. Atlas barked once, uncertain, then trotted over, tail wagging hesitantly. Emily knelt and hugged the dog, her lips pressed to his fur, fingers trembling. Lucas hung back, gaze cool and searching. No words at first, just the shuffle of feet, the sigh of wind through the sumac. Sam waited, Atlas pressed to his side. He could see the skepticism in their faces, the worry masked as concern. It had been months since they'd seen him. Years, really, since any visit felt easy or safe. Emily broke the silence. "We heard, you're living out here?" Dad, what are you doing? The question hung between them, brittle and raw. Lassa, Sam tried to answer, voice low. Fixing up the bus, making it livable. He gestured to the open door, the boards and tools, the mess of beginnings. Lucas frowned, glancing at the half-built walls, the sagging roof. You're living in this? Sam's jaw tightened. He saw the way their eyes darted over the cracked windows, the patched floor, the evidence of failure and desperation. He swallowed, hands working nervously at his sleeves. Emily crouched beside Atlas, her face half hidden by the dog's bulk. She looked up at Sam, concern and exasperation mingling in her eyes. We're worried about you. This doesn't look safe, Dad. It doesn't look right. For a long moment, Sam could not find words. The shame, so recently dulled by the rhythm of work, came roaring back, hot and sharp. He stared at the ground, feeling like a boy again, uncertain, out of place in his own skin. Atlas leaned into Emily, tail thumping with tentative hope. He nuzzled her hand, then glanced back at Sam, caught between the comfort of her touch and the pull of loyalty. Sam forced himself to speak. I know how it looks. I'm doing what I can with what I have. Lucas crossed his arms, jaw tight. Is this about pride? Or is it something else? You could stay with us, or get help. Sam shook his head, unable to meet their eyes. This isn't about pride. Not anymore. I just need to do this. For myself. His voice faltered, the truth too jagged to say out loud. Silence again, the birds in the hedges, the hum of distant traffic. Emily stood, brushing dirt from her knees. She reached out as if to touch Sam's shoulder, but stopped short, letting her hand fall. We just want you safe, she said quietly. We don't want to lose you. Atlas pressed his head against her thigh, his eyes searching hers, sensing the storm of emotions. Lucas glanced away, blinking hard. The visit was short. Emily walked the perimeter of the bus, studying every inch, her worry etched deep. Lucas remained by the car, never quite stepping fully into the clearing. They talked of little things, weather, old neighbors, Atlas's graying muzzle. Sam tried to listen, tried to let himself belong in the conversation, but every word felt thin, every glance carried a weight of things unspoken. When they finally left, Emily lingered by the door, her eyes shining. Promise you'll call, she whispered. Sam nodded, not trusting himself to answer. Lucas didn't look back, but Sam caught the way his jaw clenched, the way he hesitated before closing the car door. Atlas sat at Sam's feet, watching the car disappear down the road, his tail still. Sam reached down, fingers buried in thick fur, a lifeline against the swell of loneliness. The silence that followed was heavier than before, dense with rejection and the faintest glimmer of hope. He returned to his work with a new ferocity, measuring, sawing, hammering, the rhythm harsh, unsteady. Every nail driven was an argument with the world. Every panel lifted a quiet plea to be seen, to be understood. Atlas followed, faithful, never questioning. He pressed close during the hardest moments, his gaze gentle, his presence an answer to a question Sam couldn't ask. The ache in Sam's chest was sharper now, but beneath it was something else, a resolve. He was more alone than before, but also more certain. He would finish what he'd started, not to prove anything, but because somewhere, deep in the marrow of this battered bus and these long, bruised days, he was finding a reason to stay. The days after his children's visit stretched long and quiet, tinged with the ache of their absence. Sam worked harder, driving nails, fitting panels, pouring himself into each task as if effort alone could stitch closed the wound their leaving had left behind. The field, once a place of gentle solitude, now felt emptier, echoes of Emily's worried voice and Lucas's judgmental silence circling the old bus like a restless wind. Atlas stayed at Sam's side through it all, ever watchful, nudging his knee or pressing his head into Sam's palm when the man's thoughts ran too dark. Sam learned to move through the worst moments by focusing on the smallest details, the evenness of a seam, the weight of a screw in his palm, the precise angle of sunlight through the glass. Sometimes, these small victories were the only evidence that the day had passed. One crisp morning, low on lumber and nails, Sam decided to drive the old Crown Vic to the edge of town, Atlas riding shotgun with nose pressed to the window. The junkyard on the far side of Millersville was a sprawl of forgotten machines and broken dreams, metal gleaming in the pale light, tang of oil and rust thick in the air. Sam wandered the aisles, searching for anything that could be salvaged. A good length of copper wire, a pane of glass, a weathered plank with life left in it. As he hefted a stack of battered 2x4s onto his shoulder, a voice called from behind a pile of tires, rough and weathered but not unfriendly. "You building a boat or a fort?" Sam turned to find an older man watching him, late 70s maybe, with wild gray hair, a camouflage jacket, and a sharp, measuring gaze. Walter. The name came back to Sam in a rush. He'd heard stories growing up, tales of a neighbor who'd fought in Vietnam, fixed tractors, and drank alone most nights in the house at the end of the road. Sam nodded, managing the hint of a smile. "Neither. Just trying to fix up an old bus." Walter grunted. "Bus, huh? That the one up on Whitaker land?" "That's the one," Sam said, surprised. Walter spat into the dirt, then eyed Sam with a kind of grim amusement. "Knew your granddad. Tough old cuss. Taught me a few things about engines when I was your age." His gaze softened just a bit, reading something in Sam's stance that he recognized. "You look like you could use a few more tools and a friend." Atlas, sensing the shift, circled Sam's legs before catching the scent of another dog nearby. An ancient yellow Labrador padded from behind a wrecked sedan, graying muzzle lifted in a greeting. Atlas hesitated, then moved forward, tails wagging in tentative arcs. The two dogs sniffed, shared a look, then dropped into companionable silence as if it had always been so. Walter watched the dogs, nodding approval. "Looks like they're wiser than we are sometimes." Sam smiled, the gesture coming easier now. They talked for a while, about lumber, the best way to insulate an old vehicle, the Michigan winters that could freeze a man's hope right out of his chest. Walter's tone was blunt, but his hands were sure as he picked through piles, offering up a roll of wire, a jar of rusted screws, a battered handsaw. As the morning wore on, Sam realized he was grateful for the company, for Walter's straight talk and the simple trust exchanged between old men who'd seen too much and survived anyway. It felt like community, not the kind made with banners and potlucks, but the kind built slowly, through the sharing of scars and quiet understanding. Atlas and the old lab lay together in a patch of sunlight, chins on their paws, while Sam and Walter loaded the car. "You need more wood, you come by my place," Walter said, clapping Sam on the back. "Got a shed full of odds and ends. No sense letting it rot when someone's finally got a reason to use it." Sam hesitated, pride prickling, then nodded. "Thanks, Walter, I mean it." Walter shrugged, eyes warm behind the gruffness. "World's hard enough. Men like us, we do what we can, for who we can. Take care of that dog. They save us more than we save them." Sam drove home with the back seat loaded, Atlas's tongue lolling in the breeze, heart lighter than it had been in months. He spent the afternoon repairing the window, patching a leak in the roof, using Walter's tools and scraps. Each swing of the hammer, each length of wood set straight, felt like another stitch in a wound slowly healing. Walter stopped by that evening, dropping off a bundle of cedar planks, the old lab at his heels. They stood in the field, talking little, watching the sun drop behind the tree line. Dogs sprawled together in the grass. The silence between them was comfortable. The silence of men who knew the value of presence, not words. When Walter finally left, Sam lingered on the step of the bus. Atlas pressed close against his side. The sense of isolation was softened now, edged with hope. He wasn't as alone as he'd thought. There was a new thread in his life, thin but strong, pulled taut by the hands of unlikely friends, by the work, and by the quiet companionship of dogs under a wide, forgiving sky. Autumn settled in with golden leaves rattling across the field, sunlight slipping through the bus windows in thin, hopeful bands. Each morning, Sam noticed how the light shifted, more slant, more shadow, every day a quiet tally of things changing. The bus, once just a hollow shell, was beginning to feel like something else. Not a house, not a refuge, a story in the making, held together by wood, nails, and the slow, stubborn faith that every broken thing deserves another chance. Older but still bright-eyed, roamed the perimeter of Sam's days. He kept his place by the door, head on his paws, occasionally glancing up to watch Sam fuss over a strip of insulation or a length of new wiring. Sometimes the old Labrador from Walter's place ambled over, the two dogs finding their own silent language in the yard, Atlas never far from Sam's line of sight. The bus's interior changed with each hour of labor. Sam paneled walls, sealed windows, painted the ceiling a soft bone white, hoping to catch more of the fading afternoon light. His hands remembered things his mind had nearly lost. The gentle pressure needed to smooth old wood, the careful measuring before a single cut, the trick of hanging a door so it swung true. There was pride in these small victories, pride without bravado or pretense. One gray afternoon, as rain needled at the glass and wind howled at the seams, Atlas started pawing at a crooked cabinet in the corner, his nose working at the loose boards. Sam, lost in thought, didn't notice at first. The dog persisted, nails tapping a restless rhythm, eyes flicking back with an urgency that Sam couldn't ignore. He knelt, pressing his palm against the warped wood, feeling it give. A hidden latch. With a soft pop, the board pulled away, revealing a narrow gap stuffed with forgotten things. A faded crayon drawing of a bus under a crooked sun, a tarnished toy badge, a photograph curling at the edges. On the back of the photo, his daughter's careful handwriting. For Daddy, come home soon. Love, Emily. Sam sat back, the quiet of the bus wrapping around him. He remembered the drawing, Emily's wild colors, her stubborn pride in capturing every window and every wheel. The badge, a souvenir from a day at the precinct, handed to Lucas when he was still small enough to believe every story his father told. All of it stashed away, lost for years, surviving storms and seasons and silence. Walter came by that evening, toolbox in hand, the dogs trailing behind him through the wet grass. Sam showed him the cash, laying each item on the kitchen counter. Childhood, heartbreak, hope, all mixed together. Walter's eyes, usually flinty and sharp, softened as he picked up the photo. Good memories, he said, voice gravel thick. Hard ones, too. They worked side by side, Sam guiding, Walter steadying the frame as they mounted a fresh panel on the far wall. This would be the memory wall, Sam arranged each memento with care. The drawing in the center, the badge to the right, the photograph just above, a ribbon from Emily's old hairband folded at the corner. He tacked up scraps of paper, notes from the journal, a faded grocery list in his grandfather's script, a ticket stub from the first Tigers game he'd taken Lucas to. The wall grew in meaning, layer by layer, a mosaic not of what was lost, but of what had endured. Walter stepped back, crossing his arms. "Looks like a home now." Atlas watched, ears tipped forward, tail giving a single approving sweep as Sam finished. The bus felt fuller, warmer, a container for the good and the hard, a bridge across years of silence. Sam stared at the wall, letting the memories settle in him. The grief was still sharp, but now it was threaded with gratitude. He wasn't just remembering what he'd lost, but honoring what had survived. The wind quieted after dark. Sam lit a lantern and made tea, pouring half into his mug and the rest into an old bowl for Atlas. Walter sat with him at the narrow table, the silence between them easy, the presence of the memory wall looming gentle and bright in the bus's soft glow. Walter spoke first, voice low. "Pain doesn't disappear, Sam. We just learn to live with it. Maybe even let it teach us a thing or two about love." Sam nodded, staring at the mementos. "I think I'm finally starting to understand that." He found himself talking more freely than he'd expected, about his mistakes, his fears, the nights when he'd almost given up. Walter listened. No judgment, only the steady reassurance of someone who'd walked the same slow road. "We all break, Sam. All that matters is what you do next." Atlas rested his head in Sam's lap, eyes closed, a steady anchor in the swirl of memory and hope. Sam stroked the dog's fur, thinking how much of his life had been saved by these small, unspoken kindnesses, a dog's loyalty, a friend's unannounced visit, the work of hands that refused to let go. Before sleep, Sam sat before the memory wall, lantern flickering, shadows shifting over the faces and words he'd almost forgotten. He felt grief, yes, but also a quiet acceptance. The wall was a promise, to remember, to forgive, to carry every scrap of joy and pain forward into whatever might come next. Atlas snored softly nearby. The old bus creaked in the wind. Sam let his eyes close. The weight of the past held tenderly in the walls he'd built, the love he'd reclaimed, one piece at a time, in the company of a good dog, and a friend who understood when words weren't enough. First frost arrived before Sam noticed, the field gone brittle overnight, blades of grass rimmed in white beneath a silver sky. The bus glowed in the pale light, its battered skin patched, windows warm, the faint scent of cedar and fresh paint rising with each breath of morning air. Sam stood at the threshold, coffee steaming in his mug, Atlas leaning into his hip as if to say, "Look how far we've come." He looked around, the memory wall gleaming, the bed tucked neatly beneath the window, shelves lined with old books and a battered radio. Each thing inside the bus was a story, a memory, a piece of himself reclaimed. The ache was still there, an old wound that didn't quite close, but it wasn't the only thing he carried now. There was pride, too. Gratitude. A slow-blooming sense that what he'd built here was more than shelter. It was evidence of endurance, forgiveness, and love. It was time. He dialed Emily first. She answered on the third ring, her voice uncertain. "Dad?" "Yeah, Em. Would you and Lucas like to come for dinner? See what I've done with the place?" There was a long pause, a breath filled with all the years and silences between them. Then, "We'll be there." They arrived near dusk, their car edging down the lane, tires crunching through the brittle grass. Emily stepped out first, pulling her coat tighter, scanning the field with a cautious curiosity. Lucas followed, hands deep in his jacket, brow furrowed. They walked toward the bus, hesitating just at the step. Atlas wagged his tail, a tentative, hopeful welcome. Sam pushed the door open, gesturing them inside. Warmth spilled out, soft lamplight, the aroma of stew bubbling on a hot plate, the gentle flicker of candles set in jam jars along the counter. Emily's eyes widened, tracing the woodwork, the books, the home Sam had coaxed out of ruin. Lucas hovered by the memory wall, reading the faded drawings, the ticket stubs, the photograph of the four of them. For a while, no one spoke. The silence was thick with memory, but not sharp anymore. Instead, it was a space waiting to be filled. Sam broke the quiet, voice steady. "This is where I sleep, where I work, where I remember." He nodded at the wall, letting them see it for what it was, a reckoning and a kind of invitation. "I wanted you to know what I've been doing, and why." Emily moved closer to the wall, fingertips grazing the edge of her old drawing. Her voice, when it came, was soft and unguarded. "You kept these." Sam nodded. "They kept me too." Lucas didn't speak for a long time. He traced the edge of the toy badge, thumb pausing over the worn brass, as if touching something fragile inside himself. He looked up at Sam, expression changed. Less anger, more something else, something open. Dinner was simple: stew, bread, apples picked from the tree that had somehow survived at the edge of the field. They ate in the warm glow. Atlas settled beneath the table, content with the company and the scraps pressed into his waiting mouth. Conversation started slow. Weather, small talk, the kind of careful words families use after too many years apart. But as the sky darkened, something softened between them. Emily, sipping tea, let her shoulders relax. "You really did all this yourself?" "Mostly. Walter helped. And Atlas." Sam glanced at the dog, who lifted his head in recognition. Lucas finally spoke. "It's good, Dad. It feels like home." The words hung in the air, uncertain, precious. Sam's heart thudded. He'd waited years to hear anything close to that. He nodded, not trusting himself to answer. The bus was silent, except for the creak of wood, the quiet settling of night. Emily wandered to the memory wall again, taking in the old photo. "I used to think you left because we weren't enough," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Sam shook his head, chest tight. "It was never that. I just didn't know how to come back." There was a hush, the kind that follows pain spoken out loud. Atlas crawled closer, nose pressed to Emily's hand, as if to say, "That's enough for now." Lucas stood and placed his palm flat against the wall, then let his hand rest on Sam's shoulder, an awkward, wordless gesture but honest. "We're here now," he said. "All of us." They stayed late into the evening, laughter finally coming. A tentative, unfamiliar music. They swapped stories about childhood, about Atlas's puppy days, about the small disasters and tiny miracles that filled a lifetime. Emily cried quietly, the tears slipping down her cheeks without shame, and Sam found himself blinking hard, gratitude welling up like warmth after a long freeze. When it was time for them to leave, Emily hugged Sam tight, holding on longer than she ever had before. Lucas gripped his father's hand, eyes steady, and let a real smile break through. After they'd gone, the bus felt different. Not emptier, just larger somehow. The spaces filled with possibility, and the echo of voices returned. Sam sat with Atlas at his feet. staring at the memory wall lit by one small lamp. He thought of the lesson stitched into every nail and board. Healing isn't a straight line. It's an act, a choice made every day to reach for meaning, to build something new even from broken pieces. Atlas thumped his tail, and Sam let out a long, unguarded breath. The world outside was cold and dark, but in the bus, there was light enough for hope. For tonight, that was more than enough. The next days unspooled with the hush of early winter on the horizon. Mornings were softer, the sky clear, breath misting above the grass. The bus sat sturdy and solid now, the memory wall catching sunlight, corners of old photographs glowing gold in the morning. Sam moved through each day with a different weight, less like carrying stones, more like tending a fragile, necessary garden. Everything felt unfinished, but in a way that was alive, open, honest. Emily called first, her voice warmer, more certain. "Can we come by again this weekend? Maybe help with whatever's left?" There was a lilt to her question, a hope he recognized from long ago, back when she'd trailed him through the garage, learning how to sand, how to mend. Lucas was quieter, but always there now, arriving with a sack of groceries, a box of old family records, his eyes lingering on the bus, as if measuring how far they all had come. Inside, the space changed with each visit. Emily dusted shelves, added jars of homemade jam, a knitted blanket tossed over the bench. Lucas helped patch the last soft spot in the floor, hands steady, movements careful. No more sharp words or silent judgment, just the shared work of mending. The radio played softly, an old blues station that flickered in and out, harmonica notes drifting through the late afternoon sun. Atlas trotted from one person to the next, pausing for a scratch, a biscuit, a look that needed no words. It was after supper one evening, the bus full of the warmth of wood and conversation, that Emily broke down. She sat by the window, head in her hands, tears slipping quietly through her fingers. Sam sat beside her, close but not touching, the years of distance narrowing to nothing in the shared hush. "I missed you, Dad," she said, voice shaking. "I kept thinking it would always be like before, waiting for you to call, for you to come back." Sam swallowed hard, heart pinched. He wanted to say so much, to name every regret, every time he'd faltered or run, but the words tangled in his chest. Instead, he just listened. Let her sorrow settle. Let it be real. Atlas pressed his head into her lap, tail moving slow, a silent benediction. Lucas joined them, standing by the memory wall, his shadow stretching over old drawings and ticket stubs. "It was never about the bus, was it?" His voice was steady, low. "It was about needing to believe you still cared enough to build something again." Sam looked at his son, at the way Lucas's jaw unclenched, eyes soft in the lamplight. "I didn't know how to ask for forgiveness," Sam said, the words brittle but true. "I just wanted to try, to make it right, even if it could never be perfect." Emily leaned into him, arms wrapping tight, and Lucas nodded. Acceptance in the simple act of staying close. There were no grand speeches, no sweeping apologies, just a quiet reckoning, a recognition that family was a kind of work, a practice of showing up again and again, even after the breaking. They dreamed aloud, laughter edging into the night. Emily wondered about repainting the bus, adding curtains, planting a row of wildflowers along the fence. Lucas talked of road trips, places they'd never seen, the old bus lumbering down highways with Atlas's ears flapping out the window. The talk was light, hopeful, a fragile map of the future unfolding between the shadows. Sam listened, letting himself imagine these things. He saw the bus carrying them beyond this patch of land, out to the lakes, the forests, the long two-lane roads that cut across Michigan like lines in a palm. He pictured Atlas bounding ahead, Emily's laughter floating out over the fields, Lucas reading out road signs, the three of them cradled by the rumble of wheels and the hush of second chances. That night, as Emily and Lucas prepared to leave, Lucas paused at the door, glancing around the bus one last time. "It's good, Dad. Really good." His words hung in the air, heavier than they sounded. Emily pressed her hand to Sam's cheek, thumb brushing away a tear neither of them mentioned. "Come visit us soon. Don't wait so long next time." Sam promised, and this time he meant it. After they drove away, the silence in the bus was gentle, expectant. Atlas circled 3 times before settling at Sam's feet, a sigh deep in his chest. Sam looked at the memory wall, the bright drawing, the faded badge, the photograph of 4 people, now weathered but still holding together. He realized then, home was not a place. It was the act of making, forgiving, showing up for yourself and others even after you've lost your way. The bus was proof, a second life built from scraps, from pain, from the hard, simple faith that love could find a way back. Sam leaned back, hand resting on Atlas's broad head. The ache in him was quieter now, the room brighter. Through the windows, the moon hung low and wide, the field silvered with frost. For the first time in years, Sam didn't feel lost. He felt found, by his own hands, by his children's laughter, by the steady devotion of a dog who'd never once let go. Tomorrow would come, and there would be more to fix, more to try. But tonight, forgiveness sat with him, tender and unhurried. In its presence, he dared to dream again, not of what was broken, but of all that could still be built. Sam woke before dawn, the sky still dark and deep. The air in the bus tinged with the last breaths of nighttime cold. He lay on his back, listening to Atlas's gentle snoring, the quiet tick of the cooling stovepipe, the old bus settling on its axles. Through the window, he watched a single star fade above the tree line. It was a quiet hour, his favorite, the world suspended between endings and beginnings. He rose, careful not to disturb Atlas, and put on coffee. The bus glowed softly with lamplight, shelves stacked neatly, books lined in uneven rows, the memory wall shining beneath its patina of old tears and laughter. Sam traced a finger over the drawings, the ticket stub, the photograph, the badge. Each piece was worn, imperfect, beautiful in the way that only things truly lived with can be. He thought of his grandfather, hands always rough but gentle, his voice saying, "Some things you don't fix, you honor them. You let them teach you what endurance really means." Sam understood now, the value of persistence, the quiet courage of those who keep trying even after the world turns its back. He'd spent years thinking he had to be whole to be worthy of love. But it was the breaking that made the loving real. Atlas patted over and nudged his leg. Sam smiled, ruffling the fur around his neck. "We made it, old friend," he whispered, not for anyone but the dog to hear. He wrote a letter that morning, sitting by the window as the first bands of sunlight reached the memory wall. His words came slow, honest, careful. To anyone listening, maybe you know what it feels like to carry something broken inside you. Maybe you've lost things you can't name or built walls so high you've forgotten there's still a world on the other side. I have. For a long time I thought I was finished, no good to myself or to anyone. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. But it isn't true. Because when you start to rebuild, no matter how clumsy, no matter how small, the world has a way of meeting you where you are. Sometimes the help comes quiet. A neighbor's knock, a dog's head in your lap, the voice of a child forgiving you for being gone. Sometimes it's just a moment, a breath, a glance, the hush of a new morning after a night you thought you wouldn't survive. I'm not cured. I still wake some nights with the old ghosts circling. I still wish I'd done things differently. But I've learned this. Healing isn't a place you arrive at. It's an act you choose again and again. It's picking up a hammer when your hands still shake. It's making coffee for someone you love, even if you can only share it with a dog. It's letting people in, even when you're afraid. It's telling your story, so someone else knows they're not alone. If you're listening, if you're out there fighting your own small battle, don't turn away. Reach out. Lend a hand, even if it's just to let someone know you see them. Share a memory, a meal, a story, a moment. Or maybe just share this story. You never know who might need it. Sam finished the letter, folded it, and pinned it to the memory wall. He stepped outside, Atlas beside him, breath rising like prayer into the chill of early morning. The field was silver with frost, the sun climbing slow and golden, crows lifting from the treetops, black against the new day. He walked the property line, boots crunching on frozen grass, Atlas loping ahead, the bus shrinking behind them, small, humble, but whole. Every scar on the land, every patch on the bus, every crack in his own heart felt less like a failure now, more like a record of survival, a testament to what can be mended when hope is stubborn enough to last through another winter. He thought about all the people he'd met, Walter with his weathered wisdom, Emily and Lucas with their careful forgiveness, the silent kindness of strangers who waved from the road. He thought of the times he'd been lifted, wordlessly by Atlas's eyes or the steady weight of his head. Community was never what he'd imagined, never grand, never easy, but real in the smallest gestures, the slow accumulation of trust and time. As the sun rose, Sam paused and breathed deep. He looked back at the bus, golden in the morning, a beacon in the frost. He knew there would be hard days still, setbacks and sorrow, but also laughter, grace, and the next repair waiting for patient hands. He knelt, rubbing Atlas's ears, the dog's tail sweeping the grass. "Let's go home," he said, and he meant it. To everyone listening, we all carry something broken inside us. Sometimes rebuilding isn't about fixing what's lost, but honoring the journey and sharing it with others. If you know someone struggling, reach out. Listen. Share a moment. Or maybe just share this story. You never know who might need it. If this story touched you, share your own story of resilience. Tell us about a moment, big or small, when someone or an animal helped you find hope again. Not for the numbers, but because every story brings us a little closer together. Like follow, and let's keep building a kinder, more connected community.